welcome to Literary Prospects, where we talk to authors and literary professionals about books, publishing, and the writing life. I'm Kelley Vick. I'm the host of the program, and in just a moment, it will be my pleasure to introduce today's guest. But first, a reminder that if you like what you hear, please do take a moment to subscribe. It helps us out, and you can make sure you never miss an episode. Also, we've opened a Literary Prospects shop, so if you're looking for bookish shirts, totes, and gifts, please check that out at literaryprospects.etsy.com. And to grab books featured on the podcast and check out more curated book lists, you can visit the Literary Prospects bookstore on bookshop.org. We'll leave all those links below in the show notes. And now, let's introduce today's guest. Isa Adney is a Telly and Webby Award-winning writer and documentary producer. As the profile writer for Creative Teacup and senior storyteller for ConvertKit, she's conducted over 200 interviews and written more than 75 long-form feature profiles featuring Oscar and Emmy-winning creatives, artists, and dreamers. Her latest book, The Little Book of Big Dreams, is a collection of true stories about people who followed a spark. Isa Adney, thank you so much for coming on, and congratulations on your beautiful new book, The Little Book of Big Dreams. Don Hahn, the producer of Disney's Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King, says, in The Little Book of Big Dreams, Isa Adney curates a collection of visionaries who freely share their unique insights into the hopes and horrors of creativity. The result is a brilliant roadmap for following your dreams and living a more creative life. And Frederick Joseph, the New York Times bestselling author of Better Than We Found It, says this enchanting book is a captivating ode to the boundless potential of human imagination and the transformative power of daring to dream. With its passionate prose and poignant anecdotes, it invites readers on a journey of self-discovery and empowerment, illuminating the path to achieving one's most audacious aspirations. So, what can you tell us, Isa, about the Little Book of Big Dreams? How would you describe it?
Oh gosh, well, thank you for reading those. It's obviously the first time I've heard them, and I'm so grateful to Don and Frederick for those words, and they mean a lot to me. So I was having a little moment. The book came out in November 2023, and so it's been a whirlwind since then. I'm like, wait, did that happen? Was that real? So I'm so excited to do this with you and just like take some time to reflect because I haven't, because when the book came out, there was just so much going on in my life right after that I prioritize over like PR. So I haven't actually done the whole like interview reflective thing. This is probably my first one.
Oh,
So
wow. I feel
yeah,
privileged.
thank you for that. So how would I, describe the book? I think it's a book about dreaming in the dark. It's actually a book that is not about shying away from the really hard parts of going for a dream, as well as sharing, stories of dreams that come after a really big loss or something really difficult. And my hope for it in writing all of this collection of true stories all together also is that the reader would be able to read it with their own, I'd say, life in mind. Maybe they don't even have a dream right now, but wherever they are in life, that they would be able to read those stories and find their own patterns or their own quotes or their own moments that really hit where they are now. Because as I read it and edited it over and over, I also got new stuff
Mhm.
every single time. And it often had to do with whatever I was struggling with in that moment. So I describe it as a collection of true stories about dreams come true that are meant to inspire the reader to keep going on whatever it is that is still sparking them now,
Mhm.
or whatever dream they're in the middle of, or, continuing in some kind of transition when maybe they feel lost and don't know the next direction. But I hope that people find hope in these stories as I did.
How did the concept for this book come to you?
I was crying on a bathroom floor after being rejected from a Harvard doctoral program, which ended up becoming the intro for the book, which was the hardest thing in the book to write. The intro took forever. It's partly why the book took 9 years in a way, figuring out how to set it up. But ended up coming back to the rawness of that rejection and why it hurt so bad. I think I shied away from writing about it for so long. So just felt like, okay, yeah, you got rejected from a doctoral program. Big deal. But at the time, it really shook me. And it took me a while to get the courage to really, um, honor that and dig into why was that and find the, you know, truth in that and not be so hard on myself. And so I that was a big dream. Like it was,
Mhm.
and in hindsight, right, it wasn't even like it was my big dream that I'd had my whole life. It was just more this idea of it was aiming high, right? It was aiming
Mhm.
higher than I ever had before. And I always aim high and try for big things. And I didn't get that one, which happens. But this one really crushed me. And I think in many ways, it just made me question. I was in my mid 20s, maybe, and just still trying to figure out my life and was really questioning if going for big things was worth the pain because it seemed like some pain was going to be inevitable, whether it was the pain of, doing the work to get there or the real possibility of the pain of it not working out. And I was so embarrassed because so many people knew I had interviewed because I made it into like the top 50. So it really felt like this big thing. And I think,
Felt
you know,
close.
I felt so close.
Yeah.
And, my grandparents came from Puerto Rico and I had this whole American dream narrative that I'd grown up with in my head. And stepping on Harvard campus, being at the interview, it felt like a confirmation of that narrative. Like, oh, yes, look how far we've come. And then to not get it, it sort of made me question everything and question all of the narratives, question everything I believed about dreams, and also question whether it was worth it to like try for things beyond what I felt like the world expected of someone who looked like me or was like me. And so I honestly I wanted to just like stop dreaming
Mm.
at that point. I was just like, this is a dumb way to live. I need to stop. Like, I should just, my life's fine. I can just stop here. You don't need to keep trying for all these big things. Just stop, honey. Just, you're in that survival mode and you're trying to
Mhm.
figure out how do I protect myself from
Yeah.
this happening again. And so that was my initial theory, my initial thing that I was going to try, which lasted like 0.5 seconds because my body like revolted, is what it felt like. It was like, yeah, sorry, that sounds nice and easy, but like you're a dreamer. Like you can't actually go against who you actually are. That's going to hurt worse. And
Mhm.
I think once I realized that, I was kind of like, okay, well, if this is kind of how I am, and I'm a dreamer and I'm going to keep dreaming no matter what. Um, well, let's dig into this a little more. And so I read The Alchemist, which was an allegory by Paulo Coelho about going for a dream. A
Mhm.
lot of interpretations could be applied to it, but I think that's the general understanding. And I read that it's fictional, and I just found myself thinking, what is the real life dream journey like? Like so many people have connected to The Alchemist, connected with that book, found something in it, myself included. I was like, well, what's the real life version of this? Do people have dream journeys? Is there any sort of patterns? And I had written a book before for community college students. It was very much a how to. And so at that time, I very much thought I was going to interview a ton of people about dream come true and write one of those kind of books like we've read. I just was reading one recently for research for work where it's like they've interviewed a bunch of people, but the book's about here's how to do this and here's anecdotes. Here's
Yeah.
what this person said. Here's this little thing this person did. And
Mhm.
that's what I thought the book was going to be. And then did 120 interviews, had so much beautiful information, and realized that the initial type of book I thought I was going to write didn't feel true to what I'd learned through all of these interviews and
Mhm.
how nuanced dreaming is, how personal it is, and how much we don't control. I just didn't feel right writing a book of like, here's how to make your dreams come true when there's just so much um, that we can't control.
Yeah.
But I still believed that there was things that we could do and that there was agency. And I also just thought for me, there was this inherent beauty and moment of hope every time I interviewed someone or reread a story, of just the reminder that,
Mhm.
sometimes dreams come true. And isn't that kind of crazy? And I think the older I get, the harder things that I see and the losses that I experience were experienced through the eyes of other people who I know and love, the more I'm actually amazed by that. And the more that keeps me going. And the more I need it to keep me going as the darker things kind of feel like they get closer and closer.
Yeah, you said that when you were having that bathroom floor moment, and probably after that, that you had to make a choice between cynicism and courage. Can you can you talk a little bit about that specifically, like what that means exactly? And it sounds like what all of, your interviewees sort of had to make that kind of choice as well.
Yes, I wanted to not believe in dreams. Like I genuinely wanted to stop trying so hard.
Mhm.
And there's a version of like not trying so hard that is a good thing that I'm also trying to work on always as a like chronic overachiever, former straight A student. That's another thing.
Yeah.
But like there was a part of me that wanted to truly stop pushing and stop dreaming of what else could be, or and stop trying to follow these little sparks and these little
Mhm.
dreams, because it just felt like it was gonna be too brutal of a path. And I
Mhm.
just wanted to stop trying, and I wanted to stop caring, because and that's where cynicism felt like a great path. I was like, okay, and of course I wasn't exactly thinking of it this way, but subconsciously I absolutely was. It was kind of like, okay, if you're cynical, seems like you can be hurt less. And then if I don't care as much, then maybe I also won't care whether I'm going for my dreams or not. So maybe it will that also won't matter to me. And I'll just sort of stop here and stop trying to make my life anything else than what it is, and just sort of go with the flow. And it's interesting because it's like, what's the difference between cynicism and contentment, right? And I think
Mhm.
I certainly don't have the answer to that, but as I think about that, I think the cynicism that I wanted to try on was to believe that you can't affect your dreams, and that it's just totally out of your hands, because then it like lets you off the hook. And you're like, okay, at least I'm not missing out on anything. And I needed that to be true to really let go. And at the end of the day, I just couldn't get myself to believe that that was true. And in many ways, it's because of stories I'd heard up to that point. I
Mhm.
remember just thinking about some of those stories from history and art and things that I'd consumed over my life, of just like, well, yeah, but people have suffered a lot and still dreamed, and they still keep dreaming. And that to me was just more interesting. I can't even say I was like, oh, they're right and cynicism's wrong. Da, da, da. It was all so much more hazy, but it was
Mhm.
more just this sense of moving towards curiosity. I'd say
Mhm.
all these
Mhm.
C words, but yeah, I think
Yeah.
it started with going from cynicism to curiosity about who are the dreamers and why are they still doing this when
Mhm.
so much is crushing it all the time. And then realizing that requires a certain kind of courage. And I wanted to explore that courage in the stories, and also hopefully give some of it through the book as people read it.
How did you find your dreamers? How did you go about you've made the choice, that you want to find all these people and talk to all these people. How did you go about finding them?
Yeah, I started with one particular friend who I had met in my higher education career, who did a lot of work with like students and dreams. And so I, of course, remembered him and was like, hey, I had this project idea. Have you ever had a dream come true? And would you be willing to talk to me for 30 minutes? And so I really tried to make those first steps really soon before I knew anything else. I was like, let me just get on the phone with someone and ask them these first questions. And so thankfully he said yes. And then after that, I said, hey, do you know anyone else who you would think of as a dreamer, or who you think has a dream come true, who'd be willing to talk to me? And then he would have two people. And so there was that snowball effect that was there. I also reached out to different friends and said, hey, like, if you've had a dream come true, I want to talk to you. And then I also reached out to people cold who just in my life, I'd maybe see something and think, oh man, they're definitely a dreamer. They'd be really cool to talk to. Let me just try, and there's probably tons of DMs and emails that have been ignored from me over inboxes around the world, but you never know. And there were some incredible people who said yes, like Kristen Anderson Lopez, who wrote the songs for Frozen and is an Oscar winner. She's someone who I really, really look up to a lot and admire as a writer and a dreamer. And she said yes to being in the book. And uh, that was just so cool. And so I'm always a believer in just asking because you never know. And that's how I found everybody.
Great. You recently earned your MFA. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And you worked on this book while you were in the MFA program. You'd started it before, but and you knew that this was a project that you wanted to work on while you were completing an MFA. But you've shared that when you were initially looking at programs, not every creative nonfiction program seemed open to this kind of project. They thought maybe it was more of a journalistic endeavor. So, can you talk a little bit about that and your feelings on the relationship between journalism and art and how you treated this project?
Yes, I've had a lot of struggles with trying to figure out where I fit in the writing world, which is probably why I didn't get an MFA for so long because
Mhm.
I didn't feel like I fit in any of the buckets. And so there was the journalism bucket, which, at least to my interpretation, was about, you know, seriousness, looking at big global issues or looking at it with a kind of distance,
Mhm.
and that your loyalty is to society and to your reader, not to your subject.
Mhm.
And the artistic type of CNF was often creative nonfiction, was often memoir, from what I saw,
Mhm.
memoir books or essays that were really about exploring the self or exploring these scenes in one's life. And I love it. It's beautiful. I love to read it. I don't enjoy writing it. I
Mhm.
just absolutely don't. It's just not what interests me. I've no desire to write about my own life. It's probably why the intro took me so long. It's like, oh, I got to write about me. And I just don't like it. So anyway, I didn't know where I fit. We have this concept of genre, right? And I didn't know
Mhm.
where I fit in the nonfiction world. And because of the way I approach my writing, I write profiles for my blog, Creative Teacup, as well as for my job at ConvertKit. And to me, I'd never thought of myself as a journalist because my loyalty is always to the person I'm interviewing first. Because in my mind, this is their story. I write about their lives. I'm not writing about their position in some governmental thing. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
writing about their personal life, which they owe nobody.
Mhm.
And that's what I love to write. And I can't do that on my own because I don't want to write about me. I want to write about other people. So to me, that is such a gift. And it's such a precious gift to me. And I also don't want to ever, I don't want my writing, I don't want to ever write about someone in a way that they don't feel good about. I don't want to ever share anything that they don't want shared with the world. I'm also
Mhm.
very aware that I have a lot of empathy, and that's real because I just love people and I can feel what they're feeling. And when a one-on-one interview, that might make someone feel really comfortable and say something to me,
Mhm.
really revealing. But I always have everyone read their story first. And if they see anything that they maybe shared with me because we were just having a moment that they're like second guessing, they don't want to maybe share that with the
Mhm.
world. If anyone ever wants any of that out, I'll take it out. That doesn't sound journalistic to me. So I never, never considered myself a journalist in that way. But I also approach things really, artistically as well. I'm
Mhm.
trying to tell a story. I'm trying to find a theme within that person's life. And it's, I think what keeps me going and keeps me still interviewing people and writing about it is I'm always blown away that there always is a theme. There is always so much beauty and so much poetry, it to me, in
Mhm.
every single life, every single story, every single person that I've ever interviewed. And so there's so much art there. But yeah, I've never figured out where I fit with that.
Mhm.
And I think going through the MFA was so liberating, because the program at Vermont College of Fine Arts in particular, especially the last residency we had, it felt like that a lot big thing that kept coming up was like this reminder that genre is kind of made up. It's all made up. Like you can do whatever you want. You can write however you want, whatever you want. And in my readings and in the program, I also came across so many other kinds of nonfiction writers. And I can't remember now who, but I can't remember her name, but she was a guest visiting writer speaker at her last residency. And she talked about how she thinks of her writing as like community building, not like I'm the writer and you are the other.
Uh-huh.
And like, I just felt like so seen. I was like, oh, yes. Because there was a part of me, I think, in hindsight that I thought, like, oh, I'm not really doing anything real because I don't fit in any pre-described thing that someone has said, yes, you are, part of this. And I
Mhm.
felt always a little bit, yeah, like I just wasn't a part of anything or wasn't doing anything important. And that was a big revelation to me because I believed in what I was doing and the way I was doing it. But it can be hard when you feel like you're kind of alone in that.
Yeah, but really what you're doing is creating something new. When you feel like you're alone, maybe that's not such a bad thing at all. You're just doing something new.
Mm, I like that.
And speaking of theme and art, um, I love how you've arranged the profiles in this book, in different sections, and the sections themselves sort of form this narrative, this arc, this almost kind of hero's journey through the dream. How did you come up with that structure and then get it all laid out? How did that work?
Thank you for asking about that because the structure is truly what made this a 9-year project. The
Mm.
interviews took maybe a year and a half. Writing the first draft was about a year. The everything else was wrestling. And, I'm really into The Last of Us, the video games, the show. The creator of this amazing story, his name is Neil Druckmann. So, of course, I've watched anything I can find of interviews with him. And there's a series now that the musician of the game and series did with him, Gustavo Santaolalla. And Neil recently said, a lot of writing is engineering. I was just like, yes.
That's
I
great.
never heard anyone say it like that. And I just felt like, yes, that's a part I never know how to explain to people when
Mhm.
it comes to what I do. And especially because I interview other people. So much of it is engineering and structure to create a certain theme and create a certain emotion. And so when it came to the whole book, I could have easily just dropped the interviews, however, but true to my original vision, like I wanted to say something. I wanted to show the patterns that I saw
Mhm.
without it being prescriptive of here's what the journey, because a life journey, every journey is so unique, right?
Mhm.
um but it can be helpful to see when there are patterns or when there are commonalities, just because of what we were talking about before. It's nice to feel less alone. And I
Yeah.
think at the end of the day, that's probably what I was looking for. And what I hope the book does is sometimes when you are a dreamer, um, you can feel really alone in that,
Mhm.
because that doesn't feel like the natural sort of leaning of culture.
Yeah.
And cynicism definitely is more,
Uh-huh.
you're going to have more friends, I think. And I wanted to sort of instill that, and help people feel that, but I wanted to also give them room to decide things for themselves. And
Mhm.
And so a lot of that came to the structure. And it was truly one of the hardest artistic things I've ever done, trying to figure it out because had so many starts and restarts and it just wasn't working. Because I mean, again, I remember I had 120 interviews. And once I realized I wasn't going to write the first book structure where I would just
Mhm.
be bringing in quotes and anecdotes from everybody, the stories alone needed to speak for themselves. Well, then I was like, well, I can't include all 120. So which ones am I going to choose? I never want to do that again. Like all my other books that I have planned, they're going to be like maximum, 15 profiles, long form. I will know, it's going to be
Mm.
totally different. I'm never going to do that again. I don't recommend it. It was a nightmare. But I did it and I'm so proud of myself. I can still remember the high. So I definitely used postcards, or sorry,
Mm.
index cards, and I had every story and I'd write down like a couple of words that their story had, like rejection or failure or, anything that stuck out to me from their stories.
Uh-huh.
And this was before I wrote their stories. It was just when I knew what their interviews entailed. And then it was like this mad scientist engineering of like moving things around. And I can still remember like where I was in my San Diego office, standing up, looking at all the cards and being like, oh, this is it. And that's the table of contents that is in the book. Like I knew it when I got it. I knew it and it went completely unchanged. And that shocked me because when um, the publisher that I worked with, the hybrid publisher, She Writes Press, who was wonderful, when they accept a book, because they either accept or reject it, there's also we'll accept it, but we need you to do some developmental editing. I
Mhm.
thought for sure I was going to need that because I had no one else had seen it. It was this 9-year craziness in my head. I thought there's
Mhm.
no way this is going to make sense. It's going to need some reworking. And I was ready for that. I was like, please, someone help me make this make sense. I'm overwhelmed with it. And I was shocked when they were like, no, it's great. It doesn't need any developmental editing
Wow.
structurally. Structure just worked. And so as painful as it was to spend all that time, it was worth it. And I eventually figured it out. But a lot of it was just time. And I hated that. But I didn't want to put out anything that I wasn't really proud of.
What kept you going through the 9 years of this project? That's a long stretch,
Yes,
but you
it
kept at it.
is. Thank you. I wanted
And
to
you got a
stop.
beautiful product. Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
what, but how did you do it? What kept you from burnout?
Yes. I mean, I definitely burnt out along the way many times. And I think a lot of it was what kept me going was what I learned from the book, which is
Mm.
also then created the cycle that was like, well, I've got to share this because it really did help me. So, one of the interviews with Kimberly Bryant, who founded Black Girls Code, I remember I had asked her something along the lines of what you just asked me. And
Mhm.
she just said, I just stop. And I can't remember exactly what else we dug into, but it was an absolute revelation to me then at that time. I was like, you're allowed to just stop. You're allowed to just take a break. That shows you
Mhm.
where I was at the time. And now in the culture, that's so self-care and burnout and taking breaks. That's so normal. But again, this is a 9-year project. So 9 years ago, that was kind of a revelation to me, and it wasn't something that like Instagram was talking about. If Instagram was even a thing, it might have just been a new thing then. It's crazy to think about, but so I stopped a lot, which is also why it took 9 years, right? I wasn't writing every day for 9 years. I wasn't working on the structure every day for 9 years. I was working on it in here every day.
Mhm.
I didn't know how much until it was done, and I was like, oh, there was a space in my brain that was completely occupied with this every second of every day, whether I knew it or not. But I think I remember certain periods where I used to have a morning routine where I'd get up early and I would read or write or work on my projects before my day job. And anytime I would start to get burnt out, I would scrap that whole routine and I'd just watch like Full House was my big like go-to binge show, and
Mhm.
I would only watch Full House and work and I would do nothing else productive. So I had a lot of times like that where I'd just like eat a lot of Oreos, just like try to just recover in any way that I needed at that time. So there was a lot of stopping. There was a lot of conversations with friends. Having creative friends was everything, telling them um, what I was going through, where I was stuck, and having their encouragement and their belief. I had a lot of friends who believed in this project when I stopped believing in it.
Hmm.
Um, that was huge. Having mentors like Don Hahn became a mentor to me. I interviewed him for the book, and we just connected on such like a storytelling nerd level that we became friends, and we're mostly friends, but like how do you not think of someone like Don Hahn as a mentor, because he's just has created what he has and he's so wise. Everything he says just it's not like a formal mentorship relationship. He's just my creative friend, but I look up to him obviously.
Yeah.
And he would send along encouragement once in a while. And so a lot of the people, which is interesting about a dream, when you share it, is sometimes people will not be kind and that's hard, but you also attract a lot of other dreamers. That's how you start to find
Mhm.
them, right? All of a sudden I
Oh,
wasn't
yeah.
alone and I had all these dreamers in my life, and I had more friends who were dreamers than I'd ever had at one time. And they would keep me going, and then I would keep them going, hopefully, and we just exchange and share dreams and leave space for that. And that was huge. And then at the end of the day, there were so many times, honestly, where I was like, this project is, I just can't do it. Like, I don't want to write about dreams. It's too nuanced. It's too personal. I don't, the world is so bad.
Mhm.
Like I just didn't want to do it. I wanted to give up on it. Um, and what's great about writing a book where you interviewed other people is I was like, all these people gave me their time. And obviously, I knew I couldn't put everyone in the book regardless, but I just felt like I told 120 people plus I was going to do this thing. I feel
Yeah.
like I can't not do it. If they hadn't been involved, I might have given up. But then, of course, it wouldn't have been the project that it was.
What traits did you notice through all of these interviews and in yourself as you were going through this and making this dream come true? What traits did you notice all of these dream achieving creatives shared?
I think the first one that comes to mind is this sense of experimentation,
Mhm.
and this small sense of like, okay, just what do I do next? How do I try this out on some level versus how do I go from 0 to 100? Because that is just crippling. And so everyone who I talked to, that was a big pattern of like, for example, Carrie Hammer, who started a fashion business. She was in advertising, and she like was very curious about this world. And so she like looked up summer programs. She was like, let me just try this little summer program and see how I feel after that. Someone who wanted to, Martha, who wanted to move and live in a foreign country, she started with a little 3-week vacation where she like lived there. I think she maybe got a temporary coffee shop job or something, but or like just told herself that like this is like I'm living there. And
Mhm.
so a lot of that experimentation and a lot of being okay with it starting really small and just trying out those first initial steps and being open to also maybe you don't really want this and that's okay too. So I think
Mhm.
that attitude was really common and also really helped these dreamers keep going after that dream came true. Because
Yeah.
it's you know, then once you're done, okay, well, what next? And so it's like, well, let me experiment. And this definitely a sense of curiosity. Um, definitely, and this is learned, I think, the hard way for any dreamer is like this shedding of some kind of ego. That's
Mm.
really painful for everybody. No one has that figured out. That's also, I think, really affirming is like no one's going into it just like super confident. Everyone had doubts. Everyone had self doubts all throughout the process, and everyone had to deal with all of the pain of like the way a dream can really going for a dream can really mess with your ego through rejection, through failure. And that's the thing that makes you want to stop because you're like, you start to feel like you're punishing yourself or that your dream is punishing you, like that a
Yeah.
dream can almost feel like a
Wow. Yeah.
villain.
Mhm.
And that like almost everyone feels that way, at least that I talk to. That was really affirming to know that that was normal, like breaking down on the bathroom floor, like, yeah, that it's okay. You're not doing it. That's not a sign you're doing it wrong. It's a sign that you're human. I think I have some version of that in the book. And so I think that was the other fun thing everyone had in common is that they're all human, and they're all, they weren't like they don't have some special thing figured out. It was just that they decided to try and knowing that there was no guarantee, for every dreamer and person who had a thing worked out, I could have probably interviewed all of them about something they've tried that didn't work out. But I think it's that beauty that like sometimes it does, and you never know until you try. And even if it doesn't work out, and I think that's what actually also helped me finally write the book. It's because that I was really struggling with that idea of like sometimes it doesn't work out. And I don't want to write a book that makes people feel like it was their fault if it doesn't work out. And the intro in the book, which talks about my friend Megan who lost her daughter Cam, and the way she kept dreaming, that changed me like forever.
Yeah.
Um, I love her so much, and I'm so grateful for her. And that gave me the courage to like, okay, I think actually, yeah, dreaming can be a beautiful thing even when it doesn't work out. Because of this, it opens a space. I think
Mhm.
that whole concept allowed me to do this. And I mean, even if you think about going back to the beginning, right? Applying to Harvard, like that didn't work out. That caused me a lot of pain. And yet this book wouldn't exist. Like so
Yes.
many things in my life, how they are today that I'm so grateful for, actually wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have tried for this like big crazy thing.
Yeah.
And so that also excited me too, is that like, yeah, dreaming big and going for those things, even the things that don't work out, I think can also lead on paths to things that do.
Yeah. And you didn't go the traditional publishing route
Right.
for this book. You used a hybrid publishing model. How can you talk about that decision and exactly what that looks like and how that
Yes.
worked?
Yes. So, speaking of like big dreams to then
Mhm,
being willing to like hold them in your hand and be okay with like the smaller thing and trying
mhm,
that out. If you had asked me 10 years ago when I started this book, what was the dream? It's like New York Times, number one New York Times best-selling author, right? Like
mhm,
that's what I want for this book. Um, because we see these things and they're exciting. And I don't think that's a bad thing, right? Those
mhm,
sparks and they move you
mhm,
forward. And then as you get closer and closer and you see the reality of whatever that big thing is, you can still go for it, but you'll learn what it really means and what it
mhm,
really takes. And
mhm,
so as I got closer and closer to the publishing part of this book, I had a book, my first book, Community College Success, was I had an agent, I had a small press, but like traditional publisher. I did that, so I thought, and I was in my early 20s, and I
mhm,
was just, honestly an okay writer. It was more of a how to book. I didn't work on craft. It was just here's this information I want people to know.
mhm,
Now I'm like a writer. I have craft. I have this concept that I'm so proud of. I thought for sure I will get an agent because my, first agent was more that educational type books. And so it wasn't going to be her. I was like going to find a new agent for this book,
mhm,
new publisher. Let's go. And I have like, I wouldn't say super famous people in the book, but like people who've worked on super famous things. And I knew
yeah,
enough about
yeah,
publishing to know like fame and clout, super important to the
yeah.
traditional publishing world. So I thought, okay, I definitely got this. If I got a publishing deal in my early 20s, I can definitely do it with this book. Like, this is the book, and it's a mainstream idea. Some of my other books I want to write, I actually don't think are very mainstream. Like, this is the most mainstream book I think I'll ever write. So I was like, this is it. And then I pitched in, gosh, was it, in hindsight, was it 2020 or 2021? It must have been 2020 through 2021.
Mm,
what a time, even
Wow.
in hindsight, to think about what the publishing world must have been going through and
Yeah.
at that time as well. That's crazy to think about. So anyway, I pitched maybe 60 plus agents because you read all those stories about people who pitch a billion times and then finally someone says yes. So 60 is my I think I had heard the word 60 and it was like their 60th agent or 61st or something. But like I had that number in my mind. So I was like, I'm going to do at least that. It might be more. But I had some agents who were like big deal top agents. Like you send a query letter, and then if they wanted your proposal, they'll ask for it. So I
Mhm.
had some early on ask for my proposal. So I was so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, these top agents want to know more. And then everyone was passing. And the beauty of at least getting to that place is they tell you something.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so I kept the themes that I kept seeing was that like, oh, anthology books don't sell. That was something I was hearing a lot. And it's interesting because what gave me so much hope is that I saw all these anthology books in bookstores the years
Yeah.
prior, right? I have them. Because I would
Yeah.
read them and get inspired by them. In the Company of Women is the first one that comes to my mind. My best
Yeah.
friend got that for me. So they must not have done well in the industry's mind. And so the
Mhm.
industry had then written off that whole genre at that point. And it was like, these don't work. So already that was not going to work. So I kept getting these rejections. I was like, I'm still, this is my dream. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep trying. And so then rejection after like the 60, I was like, okay, what's going on? Like, am I a terrible writer? Is it my writing sample? Is it just my marketing plan isn't good enough? What do I do? And so I learned about this woman who you can pay her $500 and she's known in the industry and she'll read your proposal and kind of give you a consultation on like, hey, here's maybe what you could fix. Here's what's not
Mhm.
working. So I paid $500, did that. And there weren't a lot of big, like, here's the part of your proposal that if you just fix, this will work. The main takeaways I got was she said in the industry right now, especially with nonfiction, to sell a nonfiction book to a traditional publisher, and obviously it's not memoir or anything, she was like, you would need to be the dream queen. And she said that, kind of facetiously, but not, it was kind of
Yeah.
like, and I knew what she meant. I would need to have 50 to 100,000 Instagram followers where I'm talking about dreams every day and content and have, this
Mhm.
big audience who follows me to be inspired all the time about dreams. And um, if you look at a lot of book deals and a lot of nonfiction books, it's a lot of influencers who have book deals now, YouTubers, and like, I'm so happy for them. That's great. And that was a moment where it was like, okay, how much do I want this?
Yeah.
Right? I could have said, okay, yes, I want a traditional deal. I want a chance at being on the New York Times bestseller list. Let's take the next year or two. Let's build that platform. Let's do
Mhm.
it and then try again. I know how to do that. I profile people who do that, right? As part of my job. I know how. But I also know how much work it is, right? It's a job. It is intense job. And I did a lot of front that's how I got a traditional deal on my first book, right? Because I did that. I had a platform about community college. I had a robust blog. I had a YouTube channel. Like I hosted a TV show. I had done all that before.
Mhm.
And I had a great time doing it, but it wasn't really, I didn't have a passion for content creation in that way, having an audience, having a platform. I didn't really want to do it again. And I also knew that once I publish this book, I'm done with dreams. Like not done, but you know what I mean? Like my next book is about something completely different. So I build this whole platform and then like abandon it or be stuck doing this like one thing that I don't want to do. So anyway, all that to say, I had to really think about all of this. She gave me a lot to think about, and I realized that I didn't want that other dream uh, enough. Like I didn't, and not in a bad way, but it was like, now I know the path, more about the path to get there. And I don't think that's the life that I personally want. And that's also, it really clarified why I'm really doing this. It's not actually to be a number one New York Times bestseller, it's actually to be an artist. and to express these stories that I want, and like that's actually the most important thing to me. And it's not that, oh, that's good and the other thing's bad. Not at all. It was just getting to know more of who I really was and what my real
Mhm.
intentions were. And that initial big dream got me there. So I'm like really grateful for that. But
Yeah.
all that to say, I was like, okay, well, that's not the route I want to take. So therefore, I don't think I'm going to get a traditional publishing deal, at least right now, from what everyone's telling me about. They're not interested in, I mean, they're also not interested in anthology books,
Mhm.
and I'm not famous. So like, I can't really, I don't want to change the other one because the book is what it is.
Yeah.
And I also don't want to build a certain level of internet fame around dreams, for me, just because that's not what I'm interested in doing in my day-to-day life. And
Mhm.
then it also wouldn't be sincere. So it wouldn't work anyway, right? Unless I
Yeah.
genuinely wanted to do it. So then I had to think, okay, well, what else? And I have a lot of friends who self-publish, and like they're so happy. Like some of my best friends who self-publish, they're so happy. It's so funny. And you hear so many traditional publishing stories where people are like, oh, here's all the miserable parts. And there's lots of room in between. But
Mhm.
I was hearing a lot about that. And I was like, well, they're really happy. So that can't be a bad route, despite what some people say. And also I've just been really into original art, and I buying paintings, and just sort of having this realization that like painters just paint what they want on a canvas. Why do people think self-publishing and writing what you want is somehow less than
Mhm.
being chosen? It's like so like that was sort of also a lot I had to wrestle with. But the problem with self-publishing for me, it's similar to how I feel about I just moved and there's like boxes everywhere and stuff. And there's a certain kind of logistical task that makes me just shut down. And I'm
Mhm.
just like, oh gosh, no, I don't want it. Like, I just know. And there's so much to figure out for actual self publishing. And I'd done a publishing process for a book through my company. And, it's those little things like the ISBN number or getting it formatted for Kindle. It just makes me, oh gosh, it sounds like the worst thing in the world to me. I don't know. I just couldn't wrap my head around that part of it. I was like, I
Mhm.
don't want to do all of that stuff. That just sounds so terrible. And I was willing to do it. I was like, I will do
Mhm.
that if that's my only choice. And maybe I'll hire one of my friends to like walk me through it, was sort of one of my thoughts. But I struggled even online to find like step by step. I don't know. It all seemed so complicated to me.
Mhm.
And so found that really overwhelming, and I just wasn't sure what to do. And then um somehow I like heard something. I was making a film for my job, and this guy, we were filming his coaching class, and he was
Mhm.
talking about getting to the root of like, what do you really want? And are there other ways to get there that you haven't thought about yet? And I
Yeah.
Googled something because I wasn't filming. I was just taking notes and I'd
Mhm.
done my part. So our cinematographer was still filming, and I was like, I just started Googling. I wish I could remember what I Googled, but that's how I found hybrid publishing. And I found She Writes Press. And what really, there are two things that made me really want to go that route. Number one was that two of my favorite authors who wrote the Nanny Diaries,
Mhm.
they were published under under She Writes Press, or
Mhm.
their sister Spark Press. And I was like, oh, they were New York Times bestselling authors, and they're going this route now.
Mhm.
So that was interesting to me. I think it's always good to like look at who's doing a thing that you're interested in and can kind of help. And so that really struck me. I liked that you have to put up money up front, but they don't just take everyone's money. Like they have a standard of what they publish, and you get accepted or not. And they only
Mhm.
have a few spots available every round. And so I liked that. And then at the end of the day, for my job, we interviewed some musicians who are, mainstream, like music on the radio. One was in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade recently.
Mhm.
And somehow, just because we're artists, I guess, we got talking about art and nerdy art stuff. And they both separately, these were two separate sessions. They were in Nashville, two separate days. And somehow they both told me about how they are independent artists and they invest in their own albums and they put up money, and then they work with these distribution partners who then get their music out. to all the places. And I just had this aha moment and I was like, oh, that's what hybrid publishing is. They're
Mhm.
distributed. My book you can buy on target.com, right?
Mhm.
That's because they are a distributor and they're now going to be distributed by Simon and Schuster's distributing arm in like a year or something, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Um, but it was interesting how all the psychological barriers I had to get through because we have
Mhm.
so many messages around what makes art legit and what and not. And it's actually kind of crazy the more you dig into it, but it's
Mhm.
real and it's hard, especially I think if you're someone who generally you don't feel like you're maybe taken seriously.
Mhm.
That can be a real mental struggle to figure out, like, or to want some sort of validation so that people take you seriously when you already feel like they don't. And again, more like ego shedding and just realizing, well, what do I really want? What do I really care about? And yeah, I went with She Writes Breast, and I will do it again as long as they want my next book. But I loved it so much.
What advice would you give to somebody right now who is in maybe they're 5 years into their 9-year project or, looking at being, um you weren't a first-time author for this one, but looking at being maybe that first-time author or trying to get a project done and get it out there and get it published. Um, what advice would you give? What would you say to them?
I would say to um, be open to getting your work out there however you can. And don't let
Mhm.
anyone stop you from getting your work out there. And if there's a particular route that in your heart, that is the dream, you don't have to give up on that either. If I really wanted a traditional publishing deal, there's so many things I could do. I could also do another book. I could, you know what I mean? It's just something I realized wasn't actually that important to me. It wasn't the most important thing. So I think I would encourage you to keep digging and think about what is the most important thing for you? Like, what is this really about for you? And ask yourself that every time you hit a roadblock. And to me, that helps give you the power back and realize what's most important to you. Okay, it's that. Okay, how could you get closer to that? And sometimes that can mean extending the timeline, which can really stink if you're like me and want to go, go, go. But I think, if anything, when it comes to what's possible with dreams, a lot of it actually, I think one of the titles is Change Your Dream or Change Your Timeline, right? And so that's something that can be discouraging sometimes, but in the end, I think is actually really encouraging, right? It's like, okay, what else could you do to get closer to this? And yeah, maybe it will take more time, but if it really matters to you, the time's going to pass anyway, as people say. So why not go for it? And then also, there's no shame in changing your dream. Maybe this isn't this exact thing or having it happen this exact way. Is that really what you want? You know, if not, that's okay too. What is it that you really want? And how do you reorient and plan around that and be open to the different ways that you could make that happen? I mean, even if it means you don't get the exact result you want. Like for example, I once dreamed of I read a Vogue profile of Taylor Swift by Jada Wan in Vogue. I said Vogue, oh, many years ago. And I was like, oh, I want to do that. Like I want to profile people in magazines. Well, magazines are dying and it's not really like that job doesn't even exist necessarily. But because I learned from the people in this book, a lot of them just hired themselves and started doing the thing themselves. And so I
Mhm.
started my own profile blog that I still run to this day that is just like gives me so much. And I love it. And I realized I don't actually care if I make money doing the thing. I just want to do the thing. And if I really cared about making money do the thing, I would make different choices and I could try different things. But to me, it's come back to what are you really, really wanting and find a way to do it even in a small way now. Also, if the timeline's going to be extended, don't just wait. My book took 9 years, but I was writing and sharing the whole time. That's why I started the blog because I was like, I need to publish something. I
Mhm.
can't just do nothing for 9 years in terms of sharing my work and that that, by the way, that profile blog led to me actually getting paid to write profiles for ConvertKit, where I work
Oh, that's
now.
great.
So you also never know how things could quite end up.
All right. Traditional last question, Isa, is with fiction, usually it's if or when the book gets turned into a movie or series, but I think that that might could happen with this one as well. What would you say is the theme song for The Little Book of Big Dreams?
Gosh, I have a whole playlist for the Little Book of Big Dreams, by the way.
Okay.
So it's definitely in there. But you know, it's funny, and I'm not just saying this because it's like a moment right now. The song "Fast Car" by Tracy Chapman
Oh yeah.
has has been my number one favorite song since the first day I heard it. And it's on the playlist. It was before that amazing Grammy performance
Mhm.
this week. But I also, you know, watched that performance a couple times. And first time I saw the full thing, I really bawled my eyes out. And something gets me every time, which is like any great art. And I think this time, what got me was the line where she sings, and we'll get out of the shelter, buy a bigger house, and live in the suburbs. And I just like, I don't know, lost it
Mhm.
because it was just this. That song to me is so much longing,
Mhm.
um, even when things are dire.
Mhm.
And I mean, she literally quit. The other line that always used to get me is like, so I quit school and that's what I did because
Yeah.
someone needed to take care of her dad. And like to me in the book, there's so many moments like that where she was going, this fictional or maybe true person in the song, right? It was like going for a dream in some way, going to school and then had to stop because
Mhm.
of something outside of her control. But yet there's never this, the longing never stops. And to me, that's that that dreaming and that following that spark, and even the last lines of the song, uh we've got to make a decision,
Mhm.
leave tonight or live and die this way.
Mhm.
It got me again differently this week, even, and just how
Mhm.
much of life is. And I hope that the book is that reminder, is like you still have a decision even in the moments when it feels like you don't. And it's that leave tonight or live and die this way. And I think anytime you're going for a dream, you're leaving something, which is why I
Mhm.
think so many um, people don't go for them. And I don't think that's because they're like weak or like, oh, you should just do it. No, this is hard. It's hard to leave what we know, even when it's bad. It's hard. It's why the second whole section is called Leaving Home, because anytime you dream, you leave something, and that's can be terrifying. So, thank you for giving me the chance to talk about Fast Car. That would be the theme song. If anyone would like to make a docu-series of the Little Book of Big Dreams, I am open and ready, and I will sell everything I own to buy the rights to Fast Car.
Fantastic. Isa, thank you so much for coming on. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you. And everybody get the Little Book of Big Dreams.
I have it too, just in case I
Yes.
haven't thought about it in like a month because I just moved and finished my MFA, and I was like, oh, I wrote a book. What's it about? I had to like look at it and hold it to make sure I didn't forget anything. So it's right here, available wherever books are sold.
Thank you, Isa.
Thank you, Kelley.
Thanks for joining us on Literary Prospects. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. We'll see you next time.